At 6, the government has just published its plans to override part of the Brexit agreement involving trade rules for Northern Ireland, insisting it's not breaking international law. Ministers want to make it easier for some goods to move between Britain and Northern Ireland, but the changes will be without the EU's agreement.
Not a big deal. We can fix it in such a way as to remove those bureaucratic barriers, but without putting up barriers on trade moving north-south in the island of Ireland.
It's disgraceful. It does nothing to serve the interests of the people here. It flies in the face of an international agreement which he himself negotiated.
We'll have all the latest developments also on the programme tonight. Appeal court judges rule the first flight to take asylum seekers to Rwanda can take off tomorrow. Fears for the UK economy as figures show it shrank in April for the second month in a row. A judge rules that treatment should stop for this 12-year-old boy who's been in a coma since he was found unconscious at his home. And how a British athlete picked up a pen during lockdown and landed himself at the prestigious Royal Academy Summer Exhibition.
Coming up in sport on the BBC News channel, a 650th Test wicket for Jimmy Anderson as England look to limit New Zealand's lead on day 4 of the second Test at Trent.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The government has just published legislation to change Northern Ireland's post-Brexit trading arrangements, a move the EU says may breach international law. The proposals seek to override parts of the existing protocol agreed with the EU in 2020, which allows for extra checks on some goods moving across the Irish Sea. It's been a source of discontent for unionists who see it as an internal border within the UK. But today, the government published legislation that could change these arrangements, including a green lane with no checks for goods destined to stay in Northern Ireland, while goods heading into the EU across the Irish border would face red lane checks. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss insisted the move would protect the EU single market and would leave the EU no worse off. Our political editor, Chris Mason, has sent this report.
Brexit is about borders, about different rules either side of them. But borders usually separate one country from another. And yet here in Larne, in County Antrim in Northern Ireland, there is a border, checks, when goods arrive here from the rest of the UK. Those checks happen because of a deal the government signed up to, which it now doesn't like.
You've got a problem at the moment, which is that in Northern Ireland, the Stormont Assembly, the government of Northern Ireland, can't meet because of the effects of the protocol. What it does is it creates unnecessary barriers on trade east-west. What we can do is fix that. It's not a big deal.
Devolved government here in Northern Ireland isn't happening because the Democratic Unionist Party says it won't return to it while there are checks on things arriving from England, Scotland and Wales. This planned new law would get rid of these for goods staying in Northern Ireland, would give the UK greater flexibility over tax here and remove the role for the European Union's courts, the Court of Justice, in sorting out disputes over all this.
For a country like the United Kingdom to renege on an international treaty is something that I think will, it does represent a new low point.
So how did we get here? The Prime Minister's been on a farm in Hale in Cornwall today and was asked...
Have you driven any other tractors?
I've driven a lot of tractors in my... Yeah, I have.
Not long after becoming Prime Minister nearly 3 years ago, Boris Johnson did a Brexit deal with the European Union and then campaigned, without vast subtlety, to win a general election off the back of it. His deal with Brussels and election win meant Brexit did happen, but it also meant Northern Ireland sticking to some EU rules. Some in Belfast are relaxed about this and so annoyed about today's changes. Others, unionists, welcome them.
I believe that finally we are now seeing the kind of action that is required to begin the process of removing the barriers to trade within the United Kingdom.
It does nothing to serve the interests of the people here. It flies in the face of an international agreement which he himself negotiated. It is in clear breach of international law. And it is, the reality is here that the protocol is working.
I asked this Tory MP if he thought all of this was about the turbulence within the Conservative Party and questions over the Prime Minister's future.
Oh, I think you can construct a very compelling case to make that argument. I'd like to say I hope it's not true.
But you think it might be?
As I say, you can construct a very compelling case to make that argument.
To be Prime Minister is to be a diplomat.
Are you breaking international law, Prime Minister?
Boris Johnson met his Portuguese counterpart this afternoon. Shaking hands on a solution to his Northern Ireland Brexit conundrum won't happen so easily. And just in the last couple of minutes, the publication of the bill, the proposed law, the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, going on the government's website in just the last few minutes, as I say. Ministers making the argument they've been left with no choice but to act. They've been negotiating and talking to the European Union, they say, for months to no real effect, and that's why they are moving now. And they say it's essential to try and get devolved government back up and running in Northern Ireland. But whilst the DUP, the Democratic Unionists, have welcomed what's happened today, they've not said that they're going to be charging back in to devolve government. So that remains unresolved. And also in the last moment or two, the legal position published by the government as well. They are making the argument that they say this is a genuinely exceptional situation given the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland, and that is why reluctantly they have decided to act. This row, though, is only just beginning.
Our political editor, Chris Mason, thank you. Well, the proposed changes to the protocol are deeply divisive in Northern Ireland, as you just heard. While some businesses say they've struggled since the arrangements were introduced, others say they've adapted well and don't want to put at risk their trade with Europe. Here's our Ireland correspondent, Emma Vardy.
Upon the arrival of the protocol, it didn't take long for the effect on some Northern Ireland businesses to become clear.
When I emailed them, would deliveries just be the same? And they just emailed me back and said, no deliveries.
For some, the new red tape for getting goods like plants or food or materials from Britain has had a chilling effect on doing business over the Irish Sea.
A lot of the growers don't want to get involved with the paperwork.
And how's that affecting your business?
I think it's made things harder. You're trying to get stock from different sources.
Beth hopes the new legislation would eventually mean she can resume doing business with companies in Britain she's worked with for 2 decades. A key part of the government's Irish sea border plans would be having a green lane for goods which are coming to Northern Ireland and staying here. The idea of a new green lane would mean the businesses and haulage firms bringing goods over the Irish Sea would have far less paperwork to deal with. And when the lorries roll off these ferries, there'd be no need to go on through the new border posts as they do currently for checks. But there's concern the price to pay will be worsening relations with the EU. The meat and dairy industries have argued in support of the protocol because they can sell goods into both the UK and EU markets without tariffs and don't want to jeopardise those arrangements.
We would see the protocol as something to build on. We would be concerned about anything that damages trade, particularly into, obviously the risk here is trade into Europe.
But it's not just about the business practicalities, it's also about the politics. And getting a functioning government back for Northern Ireland, for now, depends on the Irish sea border problems being resolved. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Belfast.
Well, the Irish government has warned Westminster that plans to override parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol would be deeply damaging to relations between the UK, Ireland and the EU. Let's talk to Katya Adler in Brussels. So this has just happened. What is the reaction there?
Well, we heard Sophie, the Prime Minister, this morning describe the proposed changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol as trivial, but that's definitely not how the EU sees it. Just a few moments ago, we heard from the EU's chief negotiator, and he made a reminder that at the time, the protocol text was the best compromise solution that EU and UK negotiators could come up with to safeguard peace and stability on the island of Ireland after Brexit. He said there was no place here for unilateral unilateral action. He said the EU had lots of proposals as to how to deal with the kind of practical problems that have been arising from the protocol for Northern Ireland businesses and individuals. He said the Commission would be coming forward with publishing new ideas in the coming days. But if the UK continued with this unilateral level, he said the EU would be looking now to restart legal proceedings for infringements it believes the UK has already carried out under the protocol, like not carrying out certain checks. As regards the proposals today, obviously the Brussels has to wait and see till it becomes law to take action, but there's no appetite to zoom into a big trade war with the UK here. EU leaders have got their hands full with the cost of living crisis and the war in Ukraine.
Katya Adler, thank you. Judges at the appeal court have ruled that the first flight to Rwanda taking asylum seekers who've arrived illegally in Britain can take off tomorrow after a last-ditch legal bid to block it. It's not clear how many will be on board the flight. It's thought there could be fewer than 11, not around 100 as originally planned. Here's our home editor, Mark Easton.
Dozens more asylum seekers arrived on the Kent coast today. 37 men who the government says should potentially face removal to Rwanda because they've travelled from France, a safe country. And this is the Boeing 767 chartered by the Home Office to take the first group of asylum seekers on a one-way ticket to Rwanda tomorrow night. The plane can take around 200 passengers, but a maximum of just 11 asylum seekers will be aboard. 26 others due to have gone have had their removal notices cancelled. The Rwanda policy divides opinion, apparent outside the courts of justice today. For some, it's an effective way to deal with migrants who come to the UK illegally. For others, it's an immoral and unlawful way to treat vulnerable people who are asking the UK for sanctuary.
To stay removal of asylum seekers to...
Lawyers were making a last-ditch attempt in the Court of Appeal to stop tomorrow's Rwanda flight, but the three judges, led by Lord Justice Singh, decided there was not enough to overturn last week's decision to let the plane take off.
This court cannot therefore interfere with that conclusion.
Campaigners were disappointed by the judgment, but there will be a full legal review of the Rwanda policy in the courts to be completed by the end of July.
We hope the courts in July and that longer hearing will take a different view, because it's a fundamentally unlawful policy. Claiming asylum is a human right, and Rwanda is not a safe country to which people can be returned.
At the United Nations in Geneva, the news that asylum seekers were to be forcibly removed to Rwanda was described as catastrophic.
We believe that this is all wrong. This is all wrong, this deal, for so many different reasons.
The Home Secretary has always argued that her Rwandan removals policy is designed to deter people from taking dangerous and unnecessary journeys from safe countries and will undermine the criminal operations of people smugglers. It is in the public interest, she says. In the Commons this afternoon, the two front benches clashed on the wisdom of the Rwanda deal.
Home Office chaos over the last few days has just shown why this scheme is completely unworkable, deeply unethical and extortionately expensive, and why it risks increasing criminal people smuggling and trafficking rather than solving the problem.
People will be properly supported, properly cared for and be safe in doing so. I think that judgment is quite significant in all of this.
If the threat of removal to Rwanda was supposed to slow down arrivals across the Channel, so far there's no sign of that. But the Home Office believes that tomorrow's departure to Kigali, even if only a single asylum seeker is aboard, could be a game changer. Mark Easton, BBC News at the Court of Appeal.
The Hollywood actor Kevin Spacey is to appear in court in London on Thursday, charged with sexual offences against 3 men, including 4 counts of sexual assault. Prosecutors authorised charges against him last month, but the actor could only be charged once he arrived in the UK. Kevin Spacey said he will voluntarily appear at Westminster Magistrates Court and is confident of proving his innocence. The UK economy shrank in April for the second month in a row, the first time it's contracted 2 months in a row since the start of the pandemic. All the main sectors of the economy, services, manufacturing and production, shrank. Some economists say the UK risks falling into recession, but the government says it's focused on boosting growth. Well, our economics editor Faisal Islam is here. He's been going through the numbers. Faisal.
Thanks, Sophie. As you say, the economy is shrinking again, and
this time it's not just a forecast. The latest figures came out this morning for the month of April, and it showed a fall of 0.3%, which is more than expectations, as you can see there. But at the same time, this occurred at a time of record hikes in energy bills and that rise in taxes. And the government's blamed this negative figure on the reduction in COVID NHS spending. Now, normally we don't just focus on 1 month's data, but you can see the run of no growth essentially until there was growth back in January. As forecast suggests, a sluggish period for the next 2 months as well. So this does not necessarily mean recession, but it looks like the economy could be shrinking in this quarter. If we look ahead, a number of forecasters are now saying that the UK won't grow next year, including the Bank of England, and here are the OECD numbers. Zero growth for the UK, unlike all the other major world economies, though these numbers for the US and France aren't exactly roaring either. And all this happens at the same time as a 4-decade high in inflation of 9% heading to 10%, which will prompt interest rates to rise later this week again. Having to deal with stagnation of the economy and very high inflation at the same time is something known as stagflation that requires a tricky balancing act for both the Bank of England and the government, trying to avoid recession and rein in inflation at the same time. And it seems to be here. Sophie.
Faisal, thank you. The High Court has ruled that a 12-year-old boy who is in a coma after suffering brain damage is officially dead and should no longer receive life support despite his family's wishes. Archie Battersby was found unconscious at his home in April and has been at the centre of a legal dispute for weeks. His parents say his heart is still beating and treatment should continue, but doctors at the Royal London Hospital believe he is brainstem dead. Our correspondent Sancha Berg was in court.
Archie Battersby was a keen gymnast. He loved boxing and martial arts. But for the last 9 weeks, he has been lying in a hospital bed, kept alive by a ventilator. His family had found him unconscious at home, they believe, after an online challenge went wrong. Doctors said his brainstem had stopped functioning. They wanted to withdraw life support. Archie's family challenged that decision in the High Court, but they lost.
Lawyers for Archie's family argued that because his heart is still beating, he should not be considered dead. But the judge disagreed. She found that Archie had died on the 31st of May this year because his brainstem had ceased to function.
The hospitals say they will continue to support the family.
This is a sad and difficult time for Archie's family, and our thoughts and sympathies are with them as they come to terms with what has happened. In line with the guidance issued by the court, our expert clinicians will provide the best possible care while life support is withdrawn.
Archie's family say they'll continue to fight.
I do not believe Archie has been given enough time. From the beginning, I have always thought, what is the rush? His heart is still beating, he has gripped my hand, and as his mother and my gut instinct, I know my son is still there.
Archie will stay on life support for now, as his family try to appeal against this judgment. Sancha Berg, BBC News.
The time is coming up to 6:20, our top story this evening. The government has just published its plans to override part of the Brexit agreement involving trade rules for Northern Ireland, insisting it's not breaking international law. But the EU is threatening legal action over the move. And coming up, celebrity women go to Parliament to raise the lack of support for women facing the menopause.
Coming up on Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, warming up for Wimbledon. The Cinch Championships are underway at the Queen's Club, where British 20-year-old Jack Draper has made a winning start.
The long-awaited food strategy for England has been unveiled by the government and promises to boost the amount of homegrown produce. The Prime Minister said the plans will back the UK's farmers and create more jobs, but campaigners say it lacks detail and fails to tackle obesity by leaving out a recommended tax on sugar and salt. Our Rural Affairs correspondent Claire Marshall has the details.
From the farms to the forks of the nation, the grand plan for our food system launched today. The Prime Minister's strategy?
We have an opportunity to eat much more of what we grow in this country and produce much more in the UK. So that's why we're supporting Great British farming.
Technology and automation is touted as the way forward for farming, boosting productivity to better protect the country from global shocks like the war in Ukraine. The government says it wants to significantly expand the production of fruit and vegetables, and there'll be a consultation on whether the public sector should spend more of its procurement budget on locally grown or higher standard food. This should be music to the ears of organic farmers. On her farm near Swindon, Helen Browning is pioneering a method of grazing cows alongside trees, producing quality food while helping the environment.
The National Food Strategy grand unveiling today. What was your reaction to it?
Bit of confusion, really. I don't see anything in the strategy that's going to revolutionise our food system over the next few months and years. And that's what we need. We've got so many people who are struggling to eat well, and we really do need to give them that assistance through schools, through public procurement.
This view is echoed by the lead author of the wide-ranging review into the food system.
So I just think we need to move faster and be more bold, both on the environment and on health, if we want to create a more sustainable food system before it destroys our planet and destroys our health. We need to be bolder.
Many other campaigners are also asking what happened to the proposed sugar and salt tax and more free school meals. But after withering criticism of an earlier leaked draft, the National Farmers Union is now behind the plans.
It's really welcome to see government committing to food production and food security. There's a strong commitment in there to maintain our current levels of self-sufficiency and to produce more effectively of what we're good at, more of our fruit and vegetables, which have been in decline.
May seem peaceful out here, but food production covers so many competing interests, from the environment to health to trade, and it does seem that today's paper is a bit of a hazy compromise. Claire Marshall, BBC News, Wiltshire.
Tomorrow is the 5th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire in London, in which 72 people died. But around 1 million people could still be living in blocks of flats with flammable cladding, despite the government and property developers pledging £9 billion to remove similar material from other buildings. Judith Moritz reports.
The Grenfell fire cost 72 lives and exposed a cladding scandal which has blighted hundreds of thousands more.
Councils and housing associations must remove dangerous cladding quickly.
Leaseholders should not have to worry about the cost of fixing historic safety defects that they didn't cause.
We've all got to do better in future to ensure that issues of life and death are never overlooked again.
200 miles north of Grenfell, these social housing blocks in Salford are still being made safe. Work to remove dangerous cladding here started within a week of the tragedy, but it's yet to be replaced.
Since the cladding's off, it's gone up to 200.
Etna Crowson lives on the 8th floor and says she can't keep warm in winter.
That's why we don't have heating on.
Without the cladding, there's lower insulation and higher heating bills.
All the cold air, when the wind's blowing, comes all in here.
And your heating goes outside?
Yeah. The heating can't keep up with it. If you're on your own, which a lot are here, and you're only on one pension, you're thinking, how am I supposed to do this? I can't feed the meter and put a dinner on the table.
The Housing Association, which operates the estate, says it's helped residents with their increased costs. 5 years on from Grenfell, the government says its figures show that work has at least started on all local authority and housing association high-rise blocks. But you can see from the experience of Etna and her neighbours here in Salford how long that process can take. And in much of the private sector, where there are many more buildings, work is further behind.
I live what I would consider to be privileged lifestyle, and now I find myself in a situation where I am so utterly impotent.
Natalie Carter lives in East London. The developer which built her block has agreed to pay for recladding works. But Natalie says the ongoing disruption is causing real anguish.
I don't think people quite understand the emotional distress of having to live in a building where At any given point, you feel you could die. There ought to be compensation. It has completely turned my life upside down.
45 developers have recently pledged to pay costs within the private sector. But there are other kinds of dangerous cladding than the type used on the Grenfell Tower, and work to get rid of that is barely underway. Judith Moritz, BBC News. A group of famous women have gone to Parliament today to highlight the lack of support for women facing the menopause. Sir Rod Stewart's wife Penny Lancaster and the television presenter Lisa Snowdon are among those saying women have suffered in silence for too long. The campaigners are calling for better access to treatment, along with encouraging workplaces to become more menopause-friendly employers. Sophie Hutchinson reports.
A heat that you can never imagine, like a fire was set at your feet, that grew further and further up into your body.
Your hormones are always fluctuating, so you have this yo-yo effect. So sometimes you think, it's gone away, I've got it under control, and then it just comes back full force.
Some of the symptoms of the menopause these high-profile women have struggled with. Today they took their campaign to Parliament. They're calling for better education for health professionals, an end to scaremongering and more promotion of the benefits of hormone replacement therapies, or HRT, improved diagnosis and free HRT prescriptions in England to bring it in line with Scotland and Wales.
This is about raising awareness so women understand, partners understand, employers understand, and most importantly, the government understands that they have a responsibility to put in procedures to help women to get the treatment and the services they deserve.
Over 600 organisations have now signed up to have menopause-friendly working environments. Supermarkets, Tesco's and Sainsbury's, big retailers John Lewis and Primark, hospitals, schools, universities and high street banks. And the latest is Parliament here. Some are trying breathable uniforms, better ventilated rooms and training for managers. And getting it right can make such a difference.
I got the help I needed, and it was like night and day. It was like a switch, like a light bulb moment, you know, and it turned everything around, and it's made me feel like I can start all over again now.
MPs will continue to hear evidence about the menopause throughout the summer. Their final recommendations will be sent to the government. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
Now, coronavirus lockdowns prompted millions of people to try new hobbies and interests. Neil Geit is a man who has excelled in sport, representing Great Britain at the Special Olympics, the Games for people with intellectual disability. But the pandemic led him to discover a whole new passion that has landed him at the prestigious Royal Academy. Our sports correspondent Jo Wilson explains.
For over 250 years, London's Royal Academy has represented the best of British art. There's been a summer exhibition here since the 1760s. It's where, right now, you'll find Niall Geit and his mum and two of his football stadium pictures.
And it looked a beautiful stadium to do from when I was looking at it and came across it.
It's the first chance you've had to see them here today. What do you think of them here?
They're both wonderful.
It is a real historic moment for people with intellectual disability. To have representation like this is just phenomenal. It's just such an old exhibition with such history, and for Niall to be part of that is just beautiful, actually.
Niall's studio is his Sheffield bedroom, where he began his art during lockdown. With great encouragement from Grayson Perry and support from Special Olympics, the hobby grew into a website, into now full recognition.
You know, any kind of artistic creation is of course a gift. You know, there's a certain talent and also a certain passion that drives your creativity, and that you find your own voice and find your own mode of expression. And I think he has found his mode of expression, of course very closely related also to his sports career.
Niall's planning to compete again soon in cycling, but COVID's had a huge impact on people with intellectual disability. Special Olympics is only now just resuming events around Britain, with sessions like this one in Norfolk. The joy of sport is irreplaceable. But in this famous gallery, Niall Geit's pictures stand as a testament to pandemic innovation and barriers to be broken. Jo Wilson, BBC News at the Royal Academy.
Now, for the last time in this studio, I'll tell you why in a moment, here is Matt Taylor.
Ooh, the suspense.
I know.
I've got a little teaser of my own as well, Sophie. We've been waiting for a bit of summer heat, and there is some on the way. Not for everyone, admittedly, but through the rest of this week, heat and also humidity is going to be building across the country, probably peaking around Friday. That heat at the moment is across Spain and Portugal. Temperatures here over the next few days around 44 degrees. This chart shows how that compares with the norm for the time of year. The red colours showing well above average. Notice how they creep their way northwards, and all of the UK see temperatures at or above average for some by around 10 degrees by the time we hit Friday. What does that mean temperature-wise? Well, maybe up to around 30, 31 degrees across parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, the South East. Warm across much of England, Wales. Scotland, Northern Ireland, always a little bit cooler. And that's because throughout this week, like we've got tonight and into tomorrow, we've got weather fronts very close by, bringing a bit more cloud and a little bit of rain at times. But it does mean tonight, these are where the mildest conditions will be, with that cloud and breeze in place. Still a few spots of rain here and there. Isolated shower further south to begin with, but most of that will fade away. Clearest of skies tonight will be across central Western England and Wales. And it's here, actually, it's going to be quite a fresh night, cooler than last night. Temperatures down to around 4 or 5 degrees for the morning. But here, good deal of sunshine around to start with. Sunny spells for much of England and Wales. Small chance of a shower in northern England. Always more cloud tomorrow. Scotland, Northern Ireland, bring in a few showers here and there. The bulk of them will be across the Highlands and Islands, where it'll still be quite breezy through the day. Temperatures in the mid-teens. But across England and Wales, temperatures starting to creep up, maybe mid-20s for 1 or 2 as we finish Tuesday afternoon. There is a consequence, though. The pollen levels have been pretty high recently, and they're going to be very high again across England and Wales as we go through tomorrow and indeed for Wednesday. A little bit more cloud, though, across some western areas on Wednesday, but the cloud's still likely to bring some showers across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, and by that stage, 27 the high in the southeast corner. That heat and humidity, as I said, peaks on Friday.
Matt, thank you very much. So that is all from the BBC News at 6, and that is all from us here in this studio, because tomorrow we will be in our brand new studio here at Broadcasting House. In fact, Hugh Edwards will be there tonight at 10 for the first time, so do join him then. Now, though, the news where you are. Goodbye.